Y'all otter Portlock up your cush tussies, because we got a lot to talk about today. I'm Aidan, and welcome to the Lore Lodge. If you like what we're doing here at the Lore Lodge, please help us out by liking, sharing, subscribing, hitting the notification bell, and if you really, really love us, check out our Patreon. We've got a $1 level, and it would help us feed Archie. He deserves some food. He's over there. You can't see him, but he's there. I promise. Anyway, the native peoples of the southern Alaskan region, and we're talking that little itty bit that kind of like edges Canada a little bit. It isn't like totally Alaska. It's kind of like, it's the U.S. just being like, haha, you cannot get these to Canada. In that area live a people called the Tlingit. I'm going to try and pronounce everything in this video correctly, but much like Polish, their language doesn't Latinize very well, and it's kind of hard to put into the Latin alphabet. So if I mispronounce something, I deeply apologize. I am trying my best. In this region, the Tlingit people have a tale of what they call the Kushtaka, or the Kushtaka, or the Kushtaka. I've heard like 8 million different pronunciations of this, which makes sense because it's, a widespread out myth among the native peoples of Alaska. This legend I came across when I was doing research on things like the Wendigo and Honey River Valley and the Skinwalker, and really building our channel up from that early stage. And somebody was like, you should talk about the Kushtaka. So I did, and I went and I looked into it, and it is a word that translates literally to land otter man, which is appropriate because, it is a large himbo otter. If you kind of look at the depictions of it on the internet. But there are multiple possibilities with this thing. In some cases, it can only take the form of one specific breed of otter. In some cases, it can take the form of any otter. But what kind of permeates this is that it's a shapeshifter. So it can shapeshift anywhere between an otter and a human. And like I said, anywhere between. So you could end up with an anthropomorphic otter. Which I don't know how I would feel about that. I think it would really depend on the tone of its voice when it spoke to me. But the thing about the tone of its voice is we get two things here. One is that it emits a squealing sound that is low, high, low, kind of like an elk. I'm not even going to try and imitate that because that would make everyone uncomfortable. And we don't need that. I've already said Kush Tussie in this video. We don't need to get worse. We can, but we don't need to. When not making a low, high, low screaming sound, the Kushtaka likes to communicate by imitating the sound of a baby crying or a woman screaming for help. You might recognize this from essentially every other Native American cannibalistic creature myth, which leads me to believe that at some point in our history, the Native Americans really did have a problem with something that lurked out in the woods screaming like a woman who needed help only to do horrible things to your body. Now, as these are otter creatures, they are primarily centered around rivers, lakes, and the open sea. You will get Kushtaka inland in forests as well as on the coasts. And that's important as we get into another bit of this video. The Kushtaka is not necessarily, under all circumstances, an evil figure. It's not always a bad creature. In some cases, it will save freezing people from freezing to death by approaching them and working its magic to turn them also into a Kushtaka, which will save them from freezing to death, but also turn them into an otter for the rest of their life. So, kind of a catch-22, kind of a bit of a double-edged sword here. You're not going to freeze to death, but now you're an otter. How do you feel about that trade?
Well, at least you're alive.
This has to be the worst trade deal in the history of trade deals, maybe ever. This is what Canada was really getting out of NAFTA. So, at best, the Kushtaka is going to come along, see you freezing, do you a solid, and be like, hey man, you want to be an otter? And since you're freezing to death, you're probably just going to go with it. Also, it's not really clear in the lore that I was able to find if you have a choice, so take that as you will. Now, at worst, the Kushtaka will do something else to you, which is that it will prey upon people who are hiking in small groups or alone, usually in the woods by a river, or they're out fishing, or they're, on the coast for some reason. And what they'll do is they'll mimic the sound of an infant crying or a woman screaming for help. You'll rush to go help them, and then it will snatch you into the river, drown you and rip your body apart limb by limb. And that little bit, obviously not an exciting prospect, not something anybody wants to happen to them. But the thing about it is that this is a legend. Specifically, if we're talking about this part where the Kushtaka will appear as a large, hairy otter man and then rip people up and throw their body parts around the water. This legend goes back to before European settlement in Alaska. After European settlement in Alaska, there was a town founded. It was a town of about 31 people, so really more of a village. There were a few people who lived there year-round, but for the most part, it was seasonal workers, and this village was Portlock. Portlock is still standing in Alaska, but it is completely abandoned, and all of the villages surrounding, which are other fishing and trapping villages, claim very, very forcefully that this territory, this land, is haunted. There is something wrong with Portlock, Alaska. Portlock has been listed on the US Census exactly twice, 40 years apart. Both times it had exactly 31 residents. Portlock in and of itself is a mystery, but it's a mystery that perhaps, if you're into the supernatural, can be solved by looking at the Kushtaka. Because what the people of Portlock, which, to be fair, is a couple hundred miles west of Tlingit territory, but the people of Portlock reported seeing large, hairy humanoids off in the woods, very large footprints up to 18 inches, the sound of babies and women screaming for help out in the woods. There was also a man who was killed with blunt force trauma to the head that the coroner determined could not have been done by a human being. The explanation that they came up for was that a log must have fallen on his head, but there was no such log near his body. So, you get a lot of interesting stuff there, but then you have the fact that body parts from a lot of missing people started to show up in the water outside of Portlock. And these were not bodies that were showing up, showing signs of predation. These had been torn apart, limb by limb, shredded, as if some creature deliberately tore these people apart. And when you look at all of that put together, on the coastline, screaming women and children, people going missing, large hairy humanoid, bodies showing up torn apart in the water, that all fits very well with the legend of the Kushtaka. So, I guess the question that has to be asked is that what happened here? Did we have a serial killer who happened to know the legend and use that to his advantage? In any case, a story that starts with people at a cannery, a salmon cannery, saying, hey, we're feeling pretty uncomfortable with what's going on around the cannery, we're going to leave, and then eventually culminates in missing persons cases that are never solved and the bodies are found floating in the lake or in the bay. By the end of the 1950s, everybody left Portlock and only the postmaster remained. And to my understanding, everyone who ever lived in Portlock has passed away. To this day, the best we're ever going to get is the stories from secondhand sources and the people around Portlock who say, that village is haunted, don't go there. So, of course, when we have the money, we're going there. But we don't currently have the money. So, like I said at the beginning of this video, if you like what we do and you want to support our channel and support our adventures like the one to Centralia that we took a couple weeks ago, feel free to subscribe to our Patreon. If you can't do that, we appreciate at the very least you clicking that share button, posting this on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you have followers, and just helping us grow a little bit. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Check us out on other platforms like TikTok and Instagram, where we can be found at The Lore Lodge or The Aidan Mattis or Director Aidan. And hopefully we can bring you more shenanigans and, eventually get past the specter of Wendusi that haunts me to this day. Anyway, I'm Aidan Mattis, and thanks for stopping by The Lore Lodge.